I'm Annie Roydhouse from the OD team at Beach Energy, and today we will be talking to two experts leading the way for better workplace health, resilience and wellbeing and leadership as well. So in today's call, we'll be talking about the psychological impact of what we're experiencing right now, so the pandemic and what we might be experiencing during lockdown as well. So we have Rob Hart, founder of Zest Learning. So Rob is a psychologist and he has worked across many industries, including energy and resources, and has a lot of experience supporting fly in, fly out workers. So we've loved working with Rob in the last, say, 12 months, I think, Rob, that we've actually worked together. So we've loved Rob delivering some really energizing sessions so that we can actually manage our own well-being and energy levels and maintain really high productivity as well. So we're also joined by Stuart Harrison as well, so Chief Meaning Officer and the founder of Leadership Horsepower. So Leadership Horsepower delivers leadership, behavioural and communication training programs to develop greater interpersonal effectiveness and higher levels of performance. So Stuart is an associate at Zest Learning, a former UK Royal Marines commando, and really, both of you, welcome to the call.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annie.
Great. All right, so for many people, the pandemic has turned their sense of meaning, identity in many cases, a sense of purpose right on its head. So many people are grappling at a new reality right now and finding themselves in a new way of being and doing. So we sometimes hear of, that we're living in a VUCA world. So VUCA simply means volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And that conversation has been had for years. And I feel that, the pandemic that we have right now is just really bringing that to the surface for a lot of people. So Rob, really drawing on your experience in psychology, from a psychological perspective, what are we seeing a result of this?
Okay, so if I look at the evidence, we can all see anecdotally, I mean, each of us here online now is in a different state. Annie there, you're in Adelaide, Stuart's on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, I'm here in Victoria as we hit the next stage of lockdowns with 8 p.m. curfews now and the tightening of the grip, which we thought was relieved some while ago. So very simply with VUCA, the volatile, uncertain, and all those sort of complex and ambiguous things that are happening for each of us around the country, the first upside will be, let's look at positives, first of all. I mean, many of us, we say we're looking for meaning. Well, for me, it's about habit loops. This is the thing we need to find. So if you were used to getting up and driving to work in choked roads of traffic, sitting at your desk with a coffee, plowing through email, there's a chance to reset that reality. Maybe that commute can be now used to perhaps have a quick think and reflect for what the day looks like, build some boundaries, start setting up a bit of an exercise program, get outside for a walk, take some time to kind of ease into the day a bit more. Now we are working longer hours. Microsoft will tell us that much. We are working longer hours, on average 4 hours a day more than we were pre-pandemic. So I think boundaries are a big thing we need to look at. But to answer the question that you put there, what are we seeing in terms of psychology? Well, a huge spike in anxiety, massively. And that is on a continuum. It depends where you are. Many people are worried about going back to work. Some people are terrified about going back into lockdown. Others are indeed losing that meaning. So the thing is here to be really clear on is we're not dealing with change fatigue. We're dealing with uncertainty fatigue. And the constant abstract of this COVID virus, unless you've had the misfortune of a family member or an immediate person in your circle succumbing to it, it's a lurking threat or terror on the horizon. It's not full and clear how you will be impacted. It's just statistics. And we've come through bushfires already here in Australia at the start of the year. Now we're in pandemic and there just seems to be a roll of bad news. So my challenge to everybody is, accept that. That's what's happening. Have empathy for everyone around you. Do the right thing. And just try and see if you can create some habits every day that create some predictable routine for you. That's the key thing to get out of anxiety at this stage. What time you get up, when you have meals, how you interact, put some boundaries around your work hours. These are the key things.
Great, thank you, Rob. And we'll certainly be looking at some of the other habits that we can potentially adopt later on in our call right now. So, Stuart, in 2018, you experienced firsthand a natural disaster. So you experienced an earthquake in Papua New Guinea whilst you were working for Oil Search. So there were landslides, fatalities, and I can imagine a lot of uncertainty attached to, I guess, the fear of aftershocks. So Stu, are you able to tell us about some of the challenges that you faced and some strategies you adopted to create a certain level of certainty and clarity?
Yeah, Annie. So I think it's actually I'd been in Oil Search only 6 months or something. So it was actually my 5th rotation to go into the field. And just before going into the field, I got a phone call to say, stop, we're evacuating everybody. That had a 7.5 earthquake, which is pretty huge. Over 250,000 displaced people up there. Of course, our oil operations stopped. There were damage to facilities. Thankfully, we lost no lives, but there were lives lost up there in the locals and the nationals up there. And I sort of put my hand up and said, look, if you need a hand, let me know, and I'm happy to help in any way possible. Thinking that might be packing boxes in Brisbane, somewhere like that. And I got a phone call, the next day and said, right, get on a plane, you're going to come out here. We want you to coordinate the relief effort. And so I said, okay, off I go. I was very nervous, actually, I'd be totally truthful, a little bit anxious. And I flew in, and it was like a scene out of MASH, the helicopters going everywhere, people moving everywhere, people evacuating, etc. Part of me was a bit thrilled, there was a little bit of excitement there, but also there were quite large aftershocks. So the first night I got there, we actually had a 6.5 aftershock, which threw me out of bed and made me question a lot of things. But of course, I wasn't the only one experiencing that sort of anxiety. Everybody was feeling that sort of pain. The first thing really what I did, Annie, was, as Rob was alluding to before, there was so much uncertainty. Nobody had ever experienced an earthquake before. Nobody knew how long it was going to carry on for. There was lots of rumors flying around because of the uncertainty, like, that wasn't the big one. It was just a warm up for the big one. And of course, that rumor sort of can get people really catastrophizing about the situation. So my big thing was to create certainty. And the way I did that was I sort of used these 6 pillars, which was first one is the physical work environment. So I walked into what we call the war room. It was very untidy. It was a bit dark. It was dirty because people were traipsing in and out with dirt. There wasn't any tea or coffee anywhere. And, the information was really spread around the room and quite messy. So I worked on that first. I said, righto, guys, this is what we're going to do. I also sat them down. I sat everybody in my team down and said, listen, this is my 5th rotation. I was extremely honest with them. I said, I don't know this region. I don't know the location of the villages we're talking about. I actually don't know how Oil Search really operate. All right, I'm new to this. You're the experts. My job is to provide you and make sure that you've got everything you need to do your job, and to coordinate us to come together to get that information and make really good plans so that we can deliver on our aim, which is to deliver first respondent aid to the villages that really need it. So that was the first point. The second point is, and again, Rob and yourself have alluded to this, is the mental, emotional and physical well-being of myself first. And I know that sounds selfish, but if I wasn't managing myself well, if I didn't develop some sort of routine to manage my energy, manage my motivation and my emotional well-being, then it would sort of peter out onto everybody else and they would take my cues. So I set up a personal performance ritual. I made sure that my sleep and my diet was as good as I could make it. And I cut out a little bit of time, so it was about half an hour to 40 minutes during the day, where I could duck to the gym and do some exercise. And then I had a group activity in the evening about 6 p.m. when the runway closed in Lake Morrow in the Highlands there. And I invited people, anybody who wanted to come, just go for a walk. And it's a walk and talk with no particular agenda. So that was that side of it. And I encouraged everybody to really look and manage themselves. I would also really check in on them. All right. So, you know, what I did is from 5 o'clock in the morning, I was up, breakfast, and straight into briefings and debriefings, etc. I put up what I call an operating rhythm. So from 5 o'clock in the morning, I wrote every hour and a half hour what I was doing and where I would be and what was happening. So, you know, 6:30, I'd have a team brief where I would brief the team on what I just learned in my briefings. And then they would brief back to me what they were going to do. And then they would go 7 o'clock, they would go to the dispatch, and they'd get on helicopters and go and start delivering aid that day. I put that operating rhythm on the front door of the war room. So anybody that came had complete visibility of where I was and when I was there. Not only that, they knew where the routine of the guys, what they were doing, the guys and the girls actually. So we had a real certainty. So what we were doing, we were claiming back the certain parts of our lives that we could in amidst all this uncertainty. And what that does is give you some sort of control over the situation. And people have that knowing and that confidence. Well, I know that at 7 o'clock, I've got to go across this dispatch, and at 7:30, that's the first helicopter out of here. But I know that what I will have is the most current and up-to-date information, all right, going out into the field. So again, that gives them certainty. The other thing I did with that performance ritual and the operating rhythm was I put 2 one-hour blocks where I did rounds. And purely rounds meant I would walk around everybody in the compound, and there were quite a few, but I had 70 people that were working for us. In the warehouse, the people that were packing boxes, unloading crates, I would go to them to the helicopter laydown area. You know, these were real grassroots workers from the local village, and I would just check in with them. I would talk with them in my broken pidgin and their broken English, you know, how they were doing, what do they need. Every now and then I'd take a carton of Coke down, you know, as a feel-good thing. But really what I was doing is I was checking on their welfare and their motivation. I was getting a lot of feedback from them. And also, you know, our critical stakeholders like, you know, Pacific Helicopters, you know, our dispatch crew that were up in the aviation observation deck, and our supply chain people. So there were a lot of people that I had to keep checking in with, and it kept giving me feedback as to the current situation of energy level, the physical, the emotional and mental well-being, which really gave me information to act upon if I needed to. Also, they would give me feedback in a very casual manner. You know, what was it that I was doing that wasn't helping or was helping, or they needed more of or less of. And I took that information away and I acted upon that information. So what that did was create a really close-knit team, and they mattered to me, and hopefully I mattered to them. And I think I did in the end, because we actually performed, we actually outstripped the United Nations in terms of our delivery and performance, which was a great thing to have. So we kept an eye on that productivity by making sure everybody had an operating rhythm. I looked at engagement, you know, so I would have regular one-on-ones with people, seeing what motivates them, and having conversations, particularly with villagers, about, you know, why are they doing it? What motivates them? Tell me about their family. And of course, family is big for Papua New Guineans. And so I talked a lot about their family, a lot about their village, a lot about their clan. I said, well, tell me more, because the more I understood them, the more I could be sensitive to their needs or respond to them in a way that was I guess, conducive to them performing and feeling part of the team. And I gave recognition where it was needed. I also gave leadership roles to a lot of the Papua New Guinean nationals. So when the Prime Minister of the country came in, I handed over to one of the Papua New Guineans. I said, here's your opportunity. They don't want to hear from me. I'm an expat. They want to hear from you. So you brief them, and we just ran through a dry briefing. I said, yeah, that's fantastic. That's better than I could do. You know the region really well. And so that really gave ownership onto, you know, the whole situation for them. Communication was key, so we made sure that we had really clear communication meetings, what they were doing, what their purpose was of the meeting, and then a certain type of media. So of course we only had email and face-to-face and over the radio. So they were our main media and communication methods. And then we had what we say, we looked after performance with visual boards. So we had maps, and we had like little blue dots as to where we've been, what we've delivered. So it was a real visual. People could come in and straight away, I say, wow, you guys have been to a lot of places. So yeah, we have. Yeah, these guys are really working very hard, non-stop for 12 hours in really extreme conditions. And there were still aftershocks going. So they were anxious as well. And the visual boards and the briefing boards were all really, really clear. Anybody could come in, whether they were related to the earthquake relief team or not, and understand what was going on. So that was really, really key. So I guess essentially what we did is we created as much certainty as we could. We had a really clear vision, which was to deliver aid as quickly and as efficiently and safely as possible. And we actually wanted to show the world what we were capable of, which was quite powerful because it pulled everybody together and say, hey, we represent Oil Search here, but we're villagers, we're expats, and we're all together in the same team. So let's show the world what we can do. And it worked extremely well. I think we delivered over 200 tons of aid to 250,000 people, to over 200 villages in extremely remote locations. So it was an incredible effort that I'm very proud of to this day. I'm very proud of the team and proud of the fact that we've actually left a legacy as well.
Thank you. That's incredible what you've just said there, and you're speaking to so many different qualities of leadership there as well, which we'll speak about in a little while. I can imagine the sense of pride and motivation that you would actually generate through being able to put on the wall all the progress that was made as well. So that would have been really exciting, not exciting, but just motivating, and you giving meaning as well to what they're doing, what they're here to achieve. And I love how you walked in there initially. You had the courage to actually say you don't have all the answers, and then you created clarity from things that you could actually control, and you could communicate that as well. So that was really wonderful. So you mentioned that you were really proud of what you accomplished, but in hindsight, were there any things that you could have done differently in hindsight?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is the beauty of anything that we do. One of the communication tools or productivity tools that I like to use is an after action review. So you do something, and we did that on a daily basis. But when I look back on the whole event, what I found that I needed to improve upon was understanding the political situation, because it wasn't just a matter of getting, food and supplies to Lake Kudaboo and to Morrow Airport and then out to the particular villages, although that was a big part of it. There were so many stakeholders involved that actually it overwhelmed me. And as part of that clarity piece, I look back on and say, you know what, I needed a political advisor, somebody, maybe not daily basis, but somebody who could check in with me a few times a day. And I needed myself a visual board of political movements that was happening. So you have like regional directors, then you have the clan leaders and the town leaders and those sorts of things, the village elders, and it was really confusing for me to know who belonged to who and which region and what was the political affiliation and what did that mean for us. But I really put my faith in our CA team, which is the community affairs team, which are again national people, very, very smart people, and they really get the political situation. But certainly the political side of things would have been better. And I think really I should have taken more pictures and captured that. And I've never one to picture take. You know, I don't know. I've been to some amazing locations and situations in the world, and I never took the pictures. And the reason why I say that is, yes, it's great for nostalgia looking back, but it's also good to share with other people. And I've got borrowed pictures and stuff like that. But I think for me, a visual is such a great reminder, as well as looking at it and go, well, actually, there's something missing there. Here's a situation where I could have played that slightly differently, or come up with a different strategy, or utilize the different expertise here. So I guess the picture is like keeping a picture diary. Yeah. So they're the two things: political and picture diary.
Yeah, I guess you sharing your story just like this, I feel like I've got a really great picture in my mind. So it's absolutely an honor to hear your story here. All right, so Rob, you've been delivering a recent program called Lockdown Learning that you designed at the wake of COVID. So tell us a little bit about that, and also some important habits that we could really start creating right now to help us weather this.
Yeah, thanks indeed, Annie, for that. I think it's a lot of what Stuart said is a routine is important. And right at the outset of lockdown learning, I talked of the need to look at our habit loops. And I mentioned that earlier on. And these are ever changing. We are very adaptable to change. And I think anyone who's picked up technology, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, when these things were very underutilized barely 6 months ago, has had to learn new technology, new rhythms of working. And I'll build on some of the things Stuart said as well and apply those to life, because it's very relevant. Having a plan is key. And if you look at the 5 key psychological traits of openness, conscientiousness, agreeableness, how you deal with negative emotion, and extroversion, introversion, everybody's going to have a continuum on those scales. So if you're not used to being quite conscientious, start sort of just trying to create some basic steps at the beginning of each day. So for example, if you are finding yourself working at home, and for many people that might be with children being homeschooled, as we are here in Victoria at the moment, there's no schools open. A partner or loved one or family member who also works at a different rhythm to you all time, you have to find space to all share a fairly dodgy internet connection, find time to sit together and connect, deal with emotions and behaviors that maybe arise that were unexpected. So what we created at the very outset was a simple timetable for each person, much like we were back at school. And what that gave was immediate certainty. And it does sound a little bit pedantic, and I'm not particularly a detail-focused person. I like to just sense with intuition and do, but plan. And what we started to see was we all knew who was exercising at what time of the day. We all knew when dinner was going to be and who was cooking that. And we also knew when people were doing key activities like this interview. So right now, no one is using the internet in our household. No one is in the same room as me while I'm doing this interview. So we all get around each other, and it's really clear at the start of the day who's doing what, when, and how. So there's the first thing you can do, is set up a timetable and make sure that timetable has things for fun and enjoyment. The other thing you can do, and I look at us all here, we're all nicely dressed today like we're professional. The psychologist Galinsky talked in 2012 about something called enclosed cognition. So that's enclosed cognition. I always bang on about this because it creates a simple solution. In the mornings, regardless if it's rain, shine, or cyclone outside, I will put on running shoes and get outside. I appreciate not everyone may have the opportunity to get outside, but do something active, walk to work. Even if it's just going around the block, get out for a jog or a walk if COVID restrictions permit that. Come back, do some stretching, whatever it is to set up for the day. You've already then boosted yourself a little bit. You've given yourself a bit of time, and be conscious also of the hours you are sleeping. So I suggest here a clear start and end day for your work day, so that you shut down the system at, say, I don't know, for argument's sake, 6 p.m, and then you're present for your family. Then setting the time you go to bed and wake up, because these are things you can control. We've got a constant 24/7 drip feed of news and disaster and whatever else. So choose one trusted news source and check in with that maybe once a day to see what's happening. Don't be drip feeding yourself every few moments, because it raises your anxiety. Again, if you weren't able to exercise, or you weren't able to get good sleep pre-lockdown, now is your chance. I've seen many people improve their sleep hours, and you can track them on something like a Fitbit tracker. So give yourself 3 things. And the lockdown learning, we started off with a basis, a triangle of focus, fitness, and fortitude. So focus is what you're going to do today. Make everyone aware of that in the household. Set that up on a Sunday night for the week ahead. Fitness, well, I've just mentioned that. Go for a walk, do something active every day. You have an hour in Victoria to do something outside. So I've already done that this morning, then come home and done a 40-minute workout in the backyard before the sun came up. So already by 10 o'clock, 10,000 steps done, focused on the day. And fortitude, recognise, as Stuart said, and I love what Stuart said, he said he was a bit anxious about going into that zone, being dropped into that earthquake. This is the thing here. There has been far too much focus, I think, in popular psychology on helplessness and vulnerability. Recognize your vulnerability, but the only way you reduce anxiety and vulnerability is building courage. And that's exactly what Stuart did. He got out the helicopter and did something useful. So you can wallow in vulnerability and go, oh, look what they're doing to me. Look what the government said. Pick something you can control and do that every day, because you don't get rid of anxiety by reducing anxiety. You get rid of anxiety by building courage and taking a step forward into something new that grows you and challenges you. So that could be a 5K run that you build up to over the next 6 weeks. It could be cooking a recipe for the family that you try out. And, you know, it may be a disaster, but there's the vulnerability, right? And it may just be trying to make sure that you allocate time for yourself, as Stuart also suggested to do. So these are the things: focus, fitness, fortitude, a timetable, control your meal times, work boundaries, and aim for 7 to 8 hours of sleep per day, however you wish to do that. That would be my first tips.
Thank you. Very, very helpful. I've never really valued sleep and had the power of sleep until, you know, with the recent months as well. So that regulates so much else, you know, be it, you know, hormones, your mood, you know, your metabolism. So there's a lot to be said for being able to sleep well. Yeah, great. Well, let's turn our attention to leadership. So through Stu's story, we heard some amazing you know, traits of a leader come through. So Stu, could you maybe summarize some of the leadership skills that are really important right now for leaders?
Yeah, thanks, Annie. Look, I think first and foremost, emotional intelligence, and it's a bit of a catch cry, but, you know, think your people first. You're nothing without your team. You're nothing without your people. So invest in time in getting to know them, getting to know what makes them tick, keeping an eye on their welfare, you know, noticing subtle little changes. And really, and it's alluding to what Robert's saying about, you know, taking control, taking this certainty. It really, if you do all those simple things, and they are simple, they're not complex. It might just be a little bit contrived and forced at the moment. You take back control, but you also flip your mindset. So the VUCA mindset is one that sort of came from the Pentagon, you know, back in the 80s. But the military were obviously introduced to this a long time ago. So, you know, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. Well, you know, I was in the Royal Marines, as we say, attached to the Special Forces doing anti-terrorist work. And we were trained for that. That's actually where we thrived, not just survived, we thrived in there. So what was it that we did that actually helped us change the mindset? One of being, you know, a victim, sort of, oh, it's done to me, this is terrible, to being, no, we're gonna take control here, and we're gonna do to the world, or do to ourselves, you know, what we think is right. And it reminds me of this TED talk that a guy called Kevin Roberts, who's the global CEO of Saatchi & Saatchi, and it's a really good watch, so I recommend everybody watch it. You know, he was pulled into the Pentagon, and they said, you know, you got to help us. We got an image problem, and, you know, he sort of made a bit of a joke, say, well, you haven't got an image problem, you got an action problem. You got to stop bombing other countries. But the story was, he said, you know, they told him that about the VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, and he said, that's funny. He said, I don't see the world like that. What I see it as is vibrant. There's so much energy in the world, so much innovation in the world, that it's unreal what we can actually do and develop and make. And he said, it's the crazy people out there that are thinking outside the box, that are doing things not just in the status quo, they're sort of shaking that tree. And it's astounding the results we can get. And that's really, it's been really powerful for me, because I think, yeah, it's just a flip of the switch, isn't it? You know, it's like, well, how do you see the world? Do you see it as VUCA, or do you see it as, you know, vibrant, you know, unreal, crazy, and astounding? And I think by doing a lot of what Rob's saying, and what, you know, what I've shared with you, you're able then to flip your mindset and to help others have a more positive, more constructive mindset, and not be done to, all right, and not be suppressed by what's going on. So taking empowerment. So for me, it's looking after people and really sort of getting out there with a positive mindset. And there's heaps of leadership traits we could go into around planning, strategy, you know, those sorts of things. But people know about those, and people are good at that anyway, because we start talking about that when we need to. But if we check in with our people first, understand what makes them tick, where they're at in terms of their own emotional, physical, mental well-being, and then look after the mindset, you know, learning on the run. That's what we got to do. Learning on the run.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks, Stu. And Rob, what are some of the things that leaders can do to guide their teams in lockdown, and teams are, you know, emerging from lockdown, returning back to offices?
Yeah, thanks, Annie. I think very much I always look at the research on this for similar things. And if you look at, there's some work done in 2006 after Hurricane Katrina, which also then was used for the earthquake, sadly, that happened in New Zealand some years after, and also 9/11, which we know was at the start of last decade. And that was a psychologist called Reich, who in 2006 examined this. And three things came out. And we can liken a pandemic to a natural disaster, as we've already heard here from Stuart for the earthquake. And there's three factors that always come out for leadership and indeed individuals. Now, my suggestion here is, of course, it starts with you. And I can't stress that enough. And it sounds a bit cliched, and maybe we are all a bit lone wolf out there at the moment when we're disparate from our workplaces or our locus of family and friends. But it starts with you. And the mindset thing is here is if you can choose a negative or a positive. And we can all sort of sit here, as Stuart just said there, and go, oh, the whole world's falling apart, and oh, I can't have my coffee, and oh, my entitlement's overflowing, I must have this. Well, we need to switch that down and go, actually, what can I do? What can I create? So something we did here is I saw a lot of people getting frustrated in my neighborhood that restaurants closed and things happened. So some leadership that we took along our street was to look out for each other. We have a few elderly neighbors, and we'd text each other, and I put notes through the door, and we'd say, oh, we're going to the supermarket. Can we get you something? So this is a small example of leadership which then grew in the group and made people cohesive. So the three things are this. It's called the C3 model: control, coherence, and connectedness. So to use that example of our little neighborhood here, control, well, the shops are kind of unpredictable. There was panic buying at the start, and people were losing out because they were too frightened to go outside when they're over 70. So what we took control of was, well, we're fit, we can put on a mask and gloves and go out, and we'll bring them things. Coherence, we can all be very selfish and wallow in our own problems, but a good way to just get rid of that a little bit is to think about the wider picture of others. And a little bit of empathy as a leader goes a long way. So I challenge any leaders who are obsessed at the start with falling productivity and hours and everything else, is we're looking at output, not hours. And we have to realign expectations pretty damn quickly to be successful as a leader here. So if people really are struggling out there, if you've been a leader at the start who was micromanaging, not trusting people to work from home, there were stories of people thinking we'd all be watching Netflix. But again, as I said to you before, Microsoft Teams shows that we're working on average 4 hours longer in the working day and doing more, not less. So there's an interesting inverse discretionary effort that was happening, because people felt less worn out and less cynical, because they probably weren't battling with traffic and dealing with open plan distractions. So people felt that they were more productive, and that gave them purpose. So the coherence is finding meaning. Connectedness is where we are falling down a bit. Stu and I have had long discussions about how doing this online is nice because we see our faces, but we're not there in the room to physically sort of hear the resonance of the voice in the room and see the little micro expressions when you look around a room, and also to have those water cooler chats and share a coffee together, which is a nice thing. We can't all do this. So for leaders here, the things to do would be, how do you connect your staff? Being aware, of course, that introverts don't always want to be on Zoom. Maybe a quick phone call is great, or an email. The other thing here is, how do we create meaning? And then the thing here with meaning, I'll very quickly just say this one. It's a tiny amount of meaning. Only 20% of your time at work, if you can find 20% of your time at work that matters and creates meaning for you, you will galvanize yourself against burnout by around 60% lowered risk. So that comes from the Mayo Clinic. They looked at clinicians, and it's a great time to be looking at clinicians right now. And by doing 20% of the most meaningful work, the work that mattered most for their organization and them, again, that reduced their risk. So as leaders, go out and find what matters to your people, and make sure they have time to indulge that. and they will have more meaning, and that will create more energy and less anxiety.
Thank you. Really great practical tips there. Rob, I've often heard people talk about the feeling of being uncomfortable when asking someone else, are they okay? Doing those simple welfare checks that are so important right now. So do you have any guidance at all around how to be able to ask that question of, are you okay? That comes from a really genuine and helpful space.
Yeah, thank you. And I know Stuart will have probably a thought on this as well, but I'll quickly jump in with a couple of must-dos, if you like. Don't think you can fix everyone's problems. That's the first thing. And I would suggest here, look, there's two guys on the call, one lady on the call. And often I always say to the guys particularly, and it's not meant to be disingenuous, we've got this desire to fix things. And if you can think about yourself, and I have a wry smile with this because I think to myself, when your partner comes home, if you have a female partner or a female family member and they'll come home and you ask how your day was, you will listen for a few moments and then you'll be immediately thinking, oh, I can help you do this. I can fix that. Don't have that temptation. So ask, are you okay? And the key thing is here is to find the right time. That could be, a moment where you're on the phone and you say, hey, how are you doing? How are you really traveling? How are you really? Ask, are you okay? And then wait, because the biggest gift you can give somebody in this time is to hold space for them. And let them speak. And my challenge to everyone that would do this would be to say to them, if you're a leader or someone having that discussion, you could be a peer-to-peer, a family member to a family member, is just say, I'm not judging you. Your reality is your reality. And they may be frightened to speak up because they may be having a panic about something so insignificant to you as a person listening, but to them it could be their whole world. They may have not got an email back from something they're waiting for and it's causing them anxiety, or they may not have heard from a friend for a few days, or whatever it might be. Just leave space and don't judge, ask and listen. And I would suggest make that clear. Say, I'm just going to listen. You talk it through and then we'll pause and we'll have a little reflection and see how you feel. So the thing is here, don't put that pressure on yourself to try and fix it. We always want to say, oh, I'll do this if I was you, or, oh yeah, I know how you feel. These are the two things not to say. You don't know how they feel. You can't fix it for them because you're not them. And their reality is very different from yours right now. So just give space without judgment. But I'd suggest here, if you have been the leader who's been banging on about productivity and do more, and you've been micromanaging them and frightened them to death that they're sitting at home watching a YouTube video or having a tea break, it's probably going to be quite difficult to build that trust. So you can't suddenly switch from being sort of a domineering sort of micromanager into being this kind, good-natured person. You've got to build some trust, and that is pretty a big gap to build. So right now could be a good time to start. I'd always say to people here, we have a thing called the fresh start effect. And I'd ask everyone online, and maybe the two of us here, if you ever start a new habit, that might be a new exercise program, reading a new book, maybe a new healthy eating diet or something, or whatever you're following. Most people would start that on a Monday, the first day of their roster, or the first day of the new year. It's a fresh start effect. And we use those dates because it's a temporal landmark. So what I'd say to you today, we're at Monday when we're recording this. If anyone wants to start a new habit, think about starting it before the day's out, whether that's a power nap at lunchtime, having a conversation with one of your team, not having that coffee after 2 o'clock this afternoon because it will ruin your sleep, going out for a walk, do something this week, and maybe start today or Monday if you are getting this podcast on Monday. So whenever it is, try and think of a time you can start. So open the question without judgment, give space.
Thank you. And Stu, do you have anything to add?
Look, I think Rob's really hit it on the head there. It's really around, that whole thing around managing yourself and the relationships. So we're talking about this meaning piece, and I just had this great interaction with a client of mine, a big mining client, and they were going through very similar effects through the COVID, and even before the COVID. And I've been talking to Rob many times about this. I'd noticed over the last sort of 15 years that there was a bit of a purpose void, a meaning void in people, in work, in general. Not everybody, but in general. And a lot of the conversations I would have would come back, it will circle around to, well, what are you doing it for? What's your purpose? And I've done this thing called vision boarding. And it's about, pictorial representations of what you want to create in your life. And we can do this in a conversation with somebody. We can sort of get an idea, you know, what's meaningful to you? You know, why do you come to work? Those sorts of things. So we can inquire. But as Rob alludes to, inquire without judgment and listen, and maybe even be curious about that. And what you'll do is you'll get to know them, and you'll get to know the subtle nuances. You'll get to know when they're resonating with their vision and what's meaningful to them. And you'll also get to know when they're not. Because you'll recognize that, and you'll think, oh, okay, maybe they're not aligning with their vision, or they're feeling like they're not, and you can have an honest conversation. So I think a lot can be done in conversations around inquiry, and you know, advocacy in that inquiry, and really the art of listening. I think it's something I really need to work on myself. You know, when I listen to Rob talking about, you know, your partner, your wife coming home. I'm definitely Mr. Fix-It, you know, so I need to put a break on that. So Monday, I'm going to start that. And but it's true, right? And it's amazing when you really do listen to somebody and you inquire into, you know, what's meaningful to them or what their concern is. You have a different connection. You have a different experience, and so do they. And I think that's where the key lays in terms of interacting with other people, especially through this time.
It's an amazing feeling as well, being heard. So we might not have all of the answers to all of the problems that we have, but feeling heard is very validating, and it's very therapeutic as well. What I'm hearing as well through your insights is the power of connections, how important that is, and it has been throughout this pandemic and going forward as well. So being able to nurture those connections from a really genuine space will be really, really important. So thank you both for all of your insights today. It's really inspiring to hear the two of you. So Rob and Stu, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Annie. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie.
All right, take care.
Take care.
Right.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.